Let's talk about dropping the nap completely. So when should this happen? It's going to be slightly different for everybody, but generally speaking, the average child will need some form of daytime nap until around age 3 to 3.5. Now that surprises some people. They think, really, that long? I dropped the nap at 18 months or I dropped the nap at 2.5. But the chances are that probably was a bit too soon. If you can hang on to that nap and keep it going, your child will probably benefit from that. And around age 3 to 3.5 has shown to be a more appropriate time for that nap to go. Now, that will differ from child to child, of course, but we're talking about, on average here. So there's no rush, there really is no rush. Just because other kids that age are dropping their naps, you don't know what might be going on with their sleep in other areas. So that's not a sign that it's time for your child to drop their nap. Your child may not want to nap, so you might think, oh, well, they just don't really want to, they really resist it, so it must be time to drop it. Again, that's not a sign. I'll talk about signs in a minute. That's not a sign that they're ready to drop it. They're really going to need that sleep well past the time that they want that sleep. Toddlers and preschoolers, they've got far too many interesting things to be doing than going and taking a nap. So as I say, they probably won't want to, but they'll need to. If you have a good napper, a little one that already takes their nap very nicely in the day, then it's going to be much easier to see the signs when they're ready to get rid of the nap. If your little one doesn't nap well, never has, it's all a mess and it's always a battle, then it's going to be a lot harder to know when that's genuine nap dropping signs or just the continued nap battles. So it's just something to bear in mind. My biggest message here in my first point is don't drop the nap too soon. Now, why should you not drop the nap too soon? You're going to see other effects of overtiredness. Without the daytime sleep, you're more likely to see problems with the night sleep. And those problems can show up in things like bedtime battles, so resisting going to sleep and procrastinating and stalling. If you see a lot of that, doesn't always mean they're undertired. There's a good chance it's because they're overtired. Another thing you might see is very restless or disturbed night sleep, so frequent night wakings, just really not getting into that nice deep restorative sleep and very easily roused throughout the night. You could also see early rising. This is a classic sign of overtiredness, which I talk about a lot. So if maybe things were going well, you drop the nap, a few months down the line, you've started to see early rising kick in, and now you have a child that wakes to the day at 4:35 every day. It could be that the nap went too soon, they've built up all this overtiredness and now they're early rising. So there's so many reasons why you shouldn't drop it too soon. Often we drop it too soon when it's a hassle, just trying to get that child to go to sleep in the day has become such a big task that you just think, forget it, we won't bother. And at first it seems okay, night sleep's fine, everything's all right. It can be several months down the line before you realise, there's some overtiredness, maybe we shouldn't have dropped the nap. So if you haven't got there yet, then take this as, pre-warning so that you can be on top of that. I fell into this trap years ago, and we dropped the nap because everyone else did. He went into preschool, no one really napped anymore, so okay, that's fine. And it was 3 months later that our beautiful peaceful night sleep came unravelled. And once they figured out why, we reintroduced the nap, which wasn't easy, but we did it, and within a week that night sleep was solved. So just be warned that it has repercussions, so don't be in a rush and drop that nap too soon. So this is all my piece about when. Also bear in mind about temperament, because an easier going, go with the flow kind of child will be okay they'll get away with dropping the nap sooner. They'll be all right. They'll cope in the day, and it won't impact so much on their night. And generally speaking, these are the types who just go with the flow. Whatever routine or rules that parents put in, they just kind of adapt to and go with. They don't really challenge it. If they do, it's very short-lived, and they're just the easygoing types. Chances are, if you have that kind of child, you won't be watching this because you won't have had needs to seek help or advice. Maybe you are out of curiosity, but most people that look my kind of help and advice have got the more alert temperament types of children, myself included, so I know what it's like. These alert types, they trip us up. They are very inquisitive, they have very active minds, they find it much harder to shut down. It's not that they're naughty at all, it's just that they're so alert that they find it much harder to go with the flow and go with the routine. Their mind is challenging things. It's fine, it's a sign of intelligence, it's a positive thing, but it really does interrupt their sleep. And for more about that, do have a look at my episodes on temperament and blog posts on temperament, because it's fascinating, it really is. But when it comes to dropping the nap, the chances are they're going to want to hold on to their nap longer than the average easygoing type. Now this is really deceiving because the alert types appear to be okay on less sleep. They appear to not need as much sleep. They appear to be able to keep going, but the truth is they need more. And these little ones often hold on to the nap longer than the average child. So where the easygoing types might be dropping them around age 3, 3.5, an alert might still be napping when they start school, or maybe not fully napping, but at least still needing a bit of extra sleep in the day. Would nod off in the car. You know, if you have a child that come 4 or 5 o'clock, a car journey is gonna mean asleep, then it's a sign that they do still need that bit of sleep. That's okay, it's not a bad thing at all, but it is worth recognising that and accommodating that as best you can. And of course, if it is a school-aged child and they can't nap in the day, then early to bed, you know, just for a phase. It might be for a few weeks or a few months, but that early bedtime will help to replenish the lost sleep, and also it will stop that stretch, that length of the day being quite so long. So more alert, more sleep, generally speaking, and that's something that it doesn't show up for us. We don't go, oh yes, this child clearly needs more sleep. They will appear to need less. So just don't be fooled by that. It's so counterintuitive, I promise you. Okay, so that's my first point about dropping the nap completely. It's all about when. My next point, my second point for you, is all about the signs, and wait for the signs. Don't drop the nap, as I said, for any of those other reasons. Wait for the signs. So what are those signs? What can you look for? Well, first of all, like I said before, if your child would nap really well before, it's going to be much easier to see. So if a child that would previously go along, have a good nap, everything works smoothly, suddenly starts to struggle to settle, or maybe they're quite content and they wriggle about and they chat and they maybe sing a song, and it takes them half an hour or more to settle to sleep for that nap, where previously they would go off, you know, in sort of 10 or 15 minutes. That's a sign that they're struggling to settle for that nap. It's not coming quite so naturally to them anymore. That's one sign. Again, talking about those who were napping well, if they don't even nod off in the car, so let's say they're not taking a nap in the day, you can go about your daily routine, maybe you go out in the car in the latter part of the day and they still don't fall asleep, then that's another sign that they don't need that sleep anymore, because if there's some tiredness in there and you're in the car long enough, they'll fall asleep. So that's another sign. And that one's a good one to test as well if you didn't have a good napper. Because again, if they weren't a good napper anyway, then the first one's not going to really show. You're not going to suddenly go, oh yes, my child's struggling to nap in the day. They were anyway, so that one won't work for you. Another sign is a child who maybe will nap. They do still take their nap. They're very good at it. They'll still go down. They'll take the sleep, or they'll nod off in the car, no problem. But then they're struggling to settle at bedtime. And this is in the case of a child who wasn't previously struggling to settle at bedtime. So again, it shows up nice and clearly. Your child used to go, have a nap, go to bed, all was fine. Suddenly, the nap's still there, but bedtime's becoming a struggle. And don't do this on the first sign of one night, because that could just be a one-off. If it consistently has been happening for a week or two, and you think, what's going on? Why are we getting these sudden protests at bedtime? We weren't before. And your child is somewhere around age 3 to 3.5, the chances are they're getting ready to drop that nap, and it's actually causing them to be undertired at bedtime. Now approach this with absolute caution, because undertired at bedtime and overtired at bedtime can look the same. It can look like procrastinating and stalling and, you know, excuses, and they lie down and then they get up and then they need a drink and then they need to swap teddies and, you know, all those little things that I'm sure you've seen. They can show up with overtiredness and undertiredness. Usually one of the differences, when it's undertiredness, it's all happening in a more awake and quite calm way. When it's overtiredness, it usually has more fractiousness about it, a bit more tantrumy maybe, or just, you know, niggly or upset or cross even. That you usually get a bit more of that characteristic in an overtired. In an undertired, it's just kind of, yeah, you know, all very jolly. The two can look very, very similar, so just be careful with that. But if it's quite apparent that your child is happily taking that nap in the day, but then really struggling to settle to sleep when they previously weren't, then it may be time for the nap to go. Now, that doesn't mean it has to just go cold turkey. It can be reduced. It could be that, you know, you just go, well, let's just make that a 40-minute nap, or depending on what they were doing, you know, it might be that you just cut it down a bit and see if that helps rather than cut it out altogether. You might do it in stages and reduce it and reduce it. Quite often they'll naturally reduce how long they're sleeping anyway, and that's another great sign that they're not needing so much anymore. Maybe they were napping for 2 hours, they dropped to an hour and a half, pretty soon it became an hour, and now they're barely even getting an hour. So you know it's coming and you start to see it coming. And these are all reasons why I really love to help people get naps on track well before this, so that the actual process of dropping the nap is so much clearer. That's another point actually. If a child hasn't been napping well, never has, then again they're probably going to need it for a while longer, because they're going to have sleep deprivation in there that's built up. So those are things you can look for, signs you can look for as to when it's coming and how, you know, what to do. In fact, more to the point on what to do and handling that transition, that's my third point that I want to share with you today, is how to handle it. It, like I said, isn't just a, oh, okay, the nap needs to go now and bang, it's gone. It can be gradual, and you're gonna get tired days and not so tired days. So it may be that there are, generally speaking, I prefer things to be the same every day, but when you're going through a transition, you may get days where a short nap is needed and days where it's not. You may get days where early to bed is needed, and then days where they're fine. The chances are when that nap first goes, you're going to need a few early to bed days, because that whole long day without any sleep, first of all, can be a bit much. So, you know, you may have to just do a slightly earlier bedtime. Keep an eye on your child and don't let them get overtired. Another thing that you can do during the transitional phase is introduce quiet time. So I wouldn't go from napping to just no napping and full on action-packed days. Have quiet time. It can be sort of after lunchtime, it could be just half an hour, but just have a time where there's no major stimulation going on. We haven't got loads of playmates and visitors or telly on, or, you know, even in preschools, a lot of them will have a quiet time where there's less action and less stimulation. And during quiet time, they can have a book or a puzzle or just something that's calm and quiet. And just for that time, you know, the whole tone and the whole mood is just in a calm, relaxed state. And you can put some cushions around, and if they want to snuggle up, that's fine too. But quiet time does serve as a really nice transition between napping and not napping. I said about early nights, so always bear that one in mind too. And occasional catch-up naps might happen or might be needed. It may be that at the weekend, maybe you're out and there's a little nod off in the car. That's okay. If they nod off in the car, it shows there's some tiredness there. You know, they wouldn't go to sleep otherwise, so they obviously need to do it. But what I would say to you is, if that's happening or happening a lot, or you see that it's going to, try to time it so that it happens around the middle of the day and not too late in the day. Because if it happens too late in the day, then you might have an impact on bedtime and they might struggle to settle at bedtime. If it happens a bit earlier in the day, late morning or just after lunch, then it might be that they have that little catch up, they feel refreshed, and then they've got a nice long stretch for the rest of the day before bedtime so that they're good and ready again for bedtime. And it happens quite a lot. You know, we go through different phases, especially starting school is another classic one. Starting school, especially for the younger ones with the birthdays that, you know, mean they're going into school when they're only just 4, they can struggle with that first time. And do watch my episode about that. I have a blog piece, I think, on the first weeks of school. But that tiredness can change everything, and they were previously fine without a nap and suddenly they're exhausted. So allow little catch-ups, but try and make them at an appropriate time in the day. And if it means you have to wake your child up and go, oh yeah, she's had half an hour now, it's time to wake her up gently, and maybe then keep an eye on when bedtime needs to be. So that's okay too. So there we go. We've got when you should drop the nap, what the signs are, looking for those, and how to handle the transition as you're going through it. I hope that helps you with dropping the nap completely.